Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Journey to Perfection, the Schematics talk show. This time we want to talk about scenarios, meaning in-game scenarios made by Frontier as well as community-made scenarios. For that, we invited two guests to the show. First of all, BillyMFMays. Hey dude, how are you?
Doing alright. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Could you please introduce yourself real quick for guys out there who may not know who you are?
Yeah, I do a lot of Planet Coaster related things on Twitch and a little bit on YouTube, and that's really about the gist of it.
And our second guest today is Jonti. Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good still. Could you please also introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. My name's Jonti. My channel is called Geekism. It's all YouTube, but we play creative simulation games. Obviously Planet Coaster, but lots of other stuff as well. And we live stream Planet Coaster every Tuesday too.
And now it's our time to introduce ourselves. Hey, I'm AdfoTV. I'm the host of the show. You can find my stuff on YouTube and Twitter mostly. And I've got Cleave with me.
Hey Adfo, how you doing?
Oh, shut up.
Hey guys, I'm Cleave. You can find me on my live stream, twitch.tv/Cleave, or also at CleaveTV on Twitter, or CleaveTVTube on YouTube.
But how are you doing, Cleave?
Pretty good.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay guys, let's start with a quick round. Who played the in-game scenarios made by Frontier?
Oh, me.
I have.
No. A very meek, embarrassed no from me.
I worked through all of the ones that came at launch. We've had a few that have come out with patches since. I haven't done any of those.
Yeah, basically the same for me. I had to look at one of the scenarios that came with the summer update because I was asked to build some buildings for it and I want to check them out. But
was that like a westerny one or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But other than that, I didn't play through any of these, and I only played through the ones that came with the basic game. So guys, what do you think about them? Do you like the scenarios?
No,
not really.
Want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure.
Well,
yeah, go on, Billy, you first.
There's a lot to get into, so I'll let Geekism actually take the floor here because I have a lot of thoughts.
Well, let's start with, do you have fun when you're playing the scenarios?
Not as much as I would like. Honestly, it's just sandbox with extra steps. That's all it is.
Fair.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'll be honest with you, I worked through them with a YouTuber head on. So when Planet Coaster came out, it was pretty much all I played on the channel. And I was trying to do as much content as possible. I was pushing for daily content, and it's pretty much impossible to do the long form stuff daily. So, like the time-lapsed builds, It's pretty much impossible to do those daily. So I was always looking for other stuff to do in Blanco. So I did some tutorial stuff, and then the scenario seemed an obvious, easy, short-form content. So that's why I played through the scenarios. If I wasn't making YouTube videos, I think I'd have played 2 or 3 and stopped and gone straight to Sandbox. And that's not necessarily a slice on the scenarios. It's more that I'm just a Sandbox player in this kind of game.
So it's not because of the scenarios?
I mean, don't get me wrong. They're a bit of a hot mess. But it isn't the only reason. I'm not that sort of player anyway.
Okay, gotcha.
Well, I was just going to say, for me, I'm the kind of player who plays to make things, like, pretty, and you're not incentivized to do that when you're playing the scenarios. You're incentivized to just make as much money as possible, as fast as possible, and that seems to be just generally the gist of the goals of the scenarios. I mean, sure, there are other, like, things you have to accomplish, like get a ride with X prestige, but the only way to do that is with money, so you need to make as much money as possible. It didn't seem to appeal to me at the time, and I never went back and revisited the career mode, although when the game was launching, I had intended to do that, and I just never did it.
I kind of agree with that. The few times I did enjoy the career mode was when I was being creative. I remember specifically one of the later ones, it's like a sci-fi theme, and I decided that I was actually going to turn it into like a Tatooine from Star Wars, so it's kind of half sci-fi, half like sand dunes, and like almost like a Moroccan feel to it, and I had loads of fun building these like crazy Moroccan buildings, but with tubes and wires coming out of them. But like you say, it added absolutely nothing to the scenario as far as the game was concerned. It was good for a video and I enjoyed making it, but it wasn't like I got a tick at the end of it because I'd made these cool buildings,
See, for me, it doesn't incentivize you enough to make money. The mechanics don't do a good job of immersing you in the role of a tycoon or somebody who has to make choices on how to make a park profitable. It allows you to have as much time as you possibly can to get to the creative steps, which is, again, sandbox with the extra step. You can get to that point and you can have fun with it that way, but it just feels very pointless at the same time.
I kind of had an issue with just how the game generates peeps, and it just seems like it's a constant flow of people always coming into your park no matter how crappy it is. In that sense, it made it feel very cheap to even care about the scenarios.
So what I got from Billy is that you were missing the urgency in scenarios?
The urgency, but also just even the creative choice within managing the simulation and managing your park, it just wasn't there. And when we got the scenario editor, it was clear as to why that was. They really did not have those tools. They even said that the scenario editor was a more advanced version of what they had. We had more conditions given to us than they had to work with. So yeah, it wasn't really surprising once we got it. That's like, oh, all we had were these conditions and we were stuck with this level of game balance. It was kind of destined to fail, I guess, at that point.
Were you trying to look for a different way to manage your own park? Like, the problem with Planet Coaster is every single park is run exactly the same way. You have the choice of having an entrance fee or having rides be free, or you can have your park be free and then have rides cost money, or some sort of combination of the two. But that's really the only way to run your park, right?
Wait, wasn't that basically the only choice you had in the previous games in the Roller Coaster Tycoon franchise as well?
Yeah, it also didn't really work that well in Planet Coaster. It was pretty much impossible to have an entry fee park with free rides in scenarios.
Yeah.
You simply don't make enough money, right?
Yeah, because the guests just stay in the park too long.
Yeah.
For me, it's that in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, the scenarios weren't that strong either for the time. For me, it's not really looking for a new way to manage a park, but just different challenges that are faced based on the map. And they kind of try to do that a little bit, like, oh, here's a map where all the rides break down, you have to build around a giant obelisk, or like the last career bracket with King Coaster, having to just go crazy with your designs for your roller coasters and make like the best coasters possible. Like, they have some challenges, but is it that different from a sandbox? Not really. And one thing that I love about Planet Coaster that keeps me coming back to it is that a huge part of it is storytelling, and more so in the case of the player is the one who gets to tell the story through either environment development, or even trying to like force guest interactions in a certain way to tell a story, or even just making a ride narrative. And like scenarios and the rule sets therein are a great way to kind of force another layer of storytelling on a player, where you manipulate their behavior because you have to, condition them in a certain way to beat a scenario. And the scenario editor was another layer of storytelling that could have been added, but you really didn't have the options. The biggest weakness, honestly, is money. Coasters are too profitable, or track rides even.
And way too cheap to build.
Yeah.
They're too cheap to build. The big thing is that it's all based on ride prestige, but the factor is really small. You divide ride prestige by 37.2. If you have a 1200 prestige ride, you make $32 per ticket. They'll happily ride that, but they'll complain about, $11 for a cheeseburger, which makes no sense because that's even average in a park. And you're not able to change that scale at all. So your rides are always going to be profitable unless you want to take a hit, and then you have guests saying like, this is really good value. And if you're just an old school RCT player like me, you're just like, oh, that's bad. I need to charge you more money, but you're also breaking the game.
You want to try and find that sweet spot where they don't say it's good value and they don't say it's too expensive. You just want to find that correct number.
Yeah.
But that sweet spot is, again, could be $32 per coaster, which is...
That's obscene, yeah.
It's a hard number to get to even. Like, it would have made more sense if it was like, oh yeah, take prestige, divide it by 100, and you have an actual reasonable ticket price for a ride, $12 for a 1200 prestige ride. Yeah, that's reasonable. But $32? I think a family walks into the park with like $300 to $500 on them, and that's for the lot of them. So I really don't know.
You could argue that nowhere it says dollars other than the symbol, so you could argue that they're Planconian dollars, but then you've still got the problem of, like, in comparison within the world, the cheeseburgers at 11 Planconian dollars is too much.
Yeah.
Did you find that Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 scenarios were fun? Just a quick answer.
I honestly can't remember.
Okay. Bailey?
For the time, yes, but they also were a little bit more the same problem of, it's a cool map, but the scenarios from map to map play roughly the same with just a few variations here.
Okay, so what we're looking at right now is the fact that the scenario gameplay just simply hasn't evolved as the technology for the presentation of the gameplay has evolved.
Yeah.
Like going from 2D to 3D, for example.
Yeah, it didn't really evolve, and honestly, I think Planet Coaster took a step back.
A little bit, yeah.
I agree with Billy that the scenarios in Roller Coaster Tycoon Tycoon 1 and 2 weren't that different, but looking back, and I haven't played them in a long time, to be honest, I remember them more challenging and more diverse.
Yeah.
There were a lot more of them, that's for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
For me, I would look forward to scenario gameplay more if there were more tycoon-based logistical challenges in the game itself.
Like what?
Like, for example, having it be more challenging to get peeps to spawn at all, not just having your park open. Things like having to manage stock of stores, having the park actually open and close and empty out at the end of the day, having holiday times that you could plan where the actual population of the park would swell up and shrink based on the actual season. I hate to bring it up because it's not really on topic, but weather.
Yeah, waiting for that.
There you go, and stuff like that.
I think even just like the actual game systems they've got in, if they just tweak those, like marketing, advertising. Like, what does it do? Like, I noticed no benefit or negative for using it at all.
Yeah, I don't know.
Even then, the ad choices are a little weird. Like, you can advertise your park in a cereal box. Like, all right, like, sure.
You say that, actually. The biggest park in the UK, Alton Towers, regularly does 2-for-1 tickets on Kellogg's, which is a big cereal brand here.
There you go, Billy.
That's not just advertisement, though. That's a discount, which actually was a step back. We had coupons in Roller Coaster Tycoon, and we don't have them here.
Sure. We did have coupons in Roller Coaster Tycoon, yeah.
That's a great point. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, some sort of incentivization to bring people into the park, not just you click a button and now 5% more people spawn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of a diversity in that gameplay would go a long way, even if it was just menus.
You want to make sure that those kind of incentives cost something. You don't want to be like, oh yeah, it's nothing, we can afford it.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be like, oh, I want more people in this park, but 2-for-1 means you're making 50% revenue on park tickets and things like that.
Or something like you get a free hamburger with entry or something like that.
Yeah.
And then put your hamburger shop next to the most popular ride and pull people in your park, to specific places. And
or have them annoyed if they can't find a hamburger place once they're in there.
Another idea based on, you mentioned weather, but another seasonal thing is illness. Staff get sick, guests can get sick.
Sure.
It'd be a hard thing to simulate, just another layer, but it'd be cool to see. It's something that happens in parks all the time.
Yeah, I think that boils down to the fact that the park never actually closes.
Yeah.
Which is actually really funny because you have opening times.
Right. You have the times and it's sort of fudged.
And that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's only to manipulate the skybox and the day and night cycle, but it has no effect.
Yeah. Imagine if your workers had to go home and come back to work and they got sick and had to skip a day and you had to have actual rosters of people to compensate for them not showing up. And
probably people may be listening to this and thinking that we're just listing off pipe dreams here and listing off, oh, wouldn't it be cool if this and wouldn't it be cool if this?
Yeah.
But you have to remember that for a very long time, this game was advertised as Simulation Evolved.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't going to say it, but I'm glad you did.
Mm-hmm.
I know it sounds like a broken record and we talk about it a lot, but they really plugged the fact that this was going to be the big new amazing simulation where everything is tied in and all the creative stuff feeds back into the algorithm and
Right.
and it isn't. It's Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 with a few cool new things and a few things not there that maybe should have been and some nicer graphics.
A much better building system and undo and redo, which make the building system even better. But yeah, aside from that,
I don't think any of us are sitting here that have a problem with the creative side of the game. The actual, other than a few issues with like the gizmo and stuff, overall, it's a really great box of Lego, this game.
Yeah.
And I think if they'd have pushed that more rather than trying to do both, they'd have probably got a lot better of a reaction and maybe could have even pushed it even further to be this great sort of sandbox tool.
I agree completely. Yeah.
But I think they tried to do too much, and in trying to do too much and didn't really nail either side of the coin between simulation and creativity.
Something we talked about in the previous conversation that is lost to the YouTube gods.
In the arms of the angel.
We talked about the disconnect between the release of the game and the release of the scenario editor, and how the scenario editor being brought into the game at a later date didn't really generate a lot of traction for people to even create scenarios at all. So I was wondering if the game was incomplete on release because it didn't have the scenario editor. Should they have never made the scenario editor? Should they have made it sooner? What do you guys think about that?
Sooner, I think.
Yeah.
Of those options, I think sooner. I wasn't too too fussed that it wasn't in launch, but I think it was too little too late by the time it actually came out. We have a Discord group for Planko Spotlight. When we were planning in there, when the scenario editor was announced, we were all going, we were saying, this is it. This is going to put Planko on the map. This is going to bring back the sort of casual Let's Players. This is going to bring back people like Jacksepticeye, Markiplier. They're going to be playing all these crazy scenarios that people build. It's going to really bring back the casual player, and it's something that really people have been asking for. And then it came out, and I can probably count on one hand the scenarios that I've seen that have been any good and people have played and talked about.
Yeah, that was pretty much the gist of the last conversation we had. You summed it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he wasn't even here for it, too. That's funny.
I genuinely thought that like channels that do Spotlight content or channels that just do like regular Let's Plays, people like Conflict Nerd who played through, you know, I thought all of these were going to come back and they'd be like, send me your crazy scenarios, send me scenarios that you think are impossible.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Sam Denny said as well.
Yeah.
I remember the morning after Frontier Expo, he said to me like, guys, send me your craziest scenarios that nobody can beat and I will try to beat them. And he was really and generally hyped about that. So were we. And now,
Yeah.
My also biggest issue with it is feedback.
Yep.
You don't get enough feedback as an editor when you're building one.
You don't get enough feedback at any point in any sort of gameplay you're doing in Planet Coaster at all. So
No.
It didn't really matter how early or late they had released the scenario editor. To me, it may have not as well been released. The main thing that it's used for now is just a more advanced map editor.
Yeah.
Add the ability to adjust park boundaries or remove them entirely from Sandbox, and or add spawners that you can place, and you pretty much have the joys of the scenario editor that people actually care about. Given how really bad the rule sets were that you can adjust, given how imbalanced the game is, like at its core, it was honestly a feature that probably should have never been released now that I think about it, which I know might be harsh to say, but yeah, I mean, you see it, no one's really inspired to make a scenario for a number of reasons, and it does come down to the idea that, yeah, I just can't get this to either feel interesting or feel unique. It's just always going to play out the same way.
Yeah, the thing that really boils it down is there are just not very many different ways to play Planet Coaster. There just isn't enough variety in the way that a scenario can be constructed, even with the fail states and the different events and stuff like that we have gotten, and the traits for the guests. All this stuff is good, and it's certainly not stuff that I want to see go away, but it needs to be built on top of a deeper system that doesn't exist. Just randomly, I'm thinking of like games like Lemonade Stand, which you guys probably played way back in the day, right?
Yeah.
Simple management of goods and services for cost. Something like having to pay to stock your chief beef with burgers and having competitors for beef suppliers. That's something that could add depth into the game. It could be built on top of the scenario editor where you have to make choices. You know, it all boils down to how much money you want to make. And right now, the only way to make money is like Billy said, to optimize your coaster building. There needs to be more ways for the simulation to be evolved.
I think, again, I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but just fixing the stuff they've put in would be a start.
Yeah.
Like, I think the scenario editor comes across to me, again, like a great idea that's slightly poorly implemented, and it seems to be a running theme with all the things we've had after launch. Fireworks, great idea, very poorly implemented. Security, great idea, very poorly implemented. And I think that's what keeps coming back, is that they've got some really great ideas, but the feedback loop is just not there. And I've opened the game up here and I've come into the scenario editor because I wanted to refresh myself with it a little bit. And on the first page, it's got a breakdown rate, park-wide breakdown rate, and it's set to 1. And I can set it to 1.75 if I want. But the hell does that mean? 1.75 what?
I would imagine that means rides would break down 75% more frequently
than they do as a basic.
How is the average player supposed to know that?
How does that come across in gameplay? What does that look like?
Right.
I don't even know if it even has to do with frequency. I think it's actually almost like a dice multiplier,
right,
where there are some factors like, ride durability and, whether or not it's been inspected. Like those kind of play into your dice roll of whether or not a ride's going to break down, and this just kind of decreases your odds.
So every 10 minutes it runs a check, is the ride broken, and then that increases that chance of coming up. Yes, I see.
Yeah. It's not even just a frequency thing. It's just hey, how unlucky do you want to be? And that scale only goes from like 1 to 2.
I think it's just the fact that it's like an arbitrary number,
Yeah.
That's the biggest issue I have with it.
Yeah, more feedback.
The other biggest issue I had with it was when I first started playing with scenarios and we saw that we could move the guest spawn, and I thought, oh, that's cool, that's neat, that's going to be useful, means we can get rid of this whole people walking through a cave thing. But then my first thought was, oh, I wonder if you could just like stick it up in the air. And then I came up with the idea of them walking out of a spaceship, which is what I did in my scenario. It's called Red Planet, and my idea was that Martians exist and they are abducting humans to take them to their theme park on Mars. Okay, that was the idea. So we built this big spaceship in the middle of a crater, and they walk down the tractor beam into the park. And on the guest page, you can set traits like I've just quickly read through a few: wealthy, poor, thrill seeker, scaredy cat, single-minded, indecisive, lazy, roaming. Okay, and you can set the spawn possibility for these from none up to high. So I thought, okay, cool. So all the guests that come into this park are going to be thrill seekers because hell, they've just flown to Mars, you know. But they're going to be super thirsty and super hungry because it's been a long trip, and they're going to be a little bit nauseous because of the travel sickness. Okay, so that was my idea. But you can't do that. All these traits are singular, so you have the possibility of somebody spawning in and being either wealthy or lazy or a thrill seeker.
Yep.
Yeah.
They don't stack these traits, which I think if they'd have stacked, you could have done some really interesting combinations.
You're looking for the ability to adjust their starting stats, basically.
Yeah, they come in with the stats. I was thinking you could set up a park, in the middle of a city centre that only teenagers turn up to, and you can make them impatient and hungry and pretty cheap, but thrill seekers, you know, and you've got to tweak the part to that, but you can't do that. Again, it just seems like a good feature that wasn't quite as implemented as well as it could have done. And I think one of the big reasons this is because they, after being quite open in the alpha, they've really closed off since the game has launched. And I'm sure there are many people out there who would love to have baited this for them and played around with this and given them feedback.
That boils down to, should the editor have been in the game on release, and that would have given us a chance to give feedback like this during the beta period, which, thinking back on, was all too short to go from Alpha 3 to a 2-week beta to a release of the game.
It was a promotional beta.
Yeah.
As is the norm in the game industry these days, so we can't fault them for that. So
yeah.
The other norm in the game industry is that, you know, for large number updates, they have a beta update as well, you know.
Right.
Minecraft, they have snapshots, you know, other big titles do it.
Even Elite Dangerous does it.
Yeah, and it just seems really strange after having a relatively open alpha with all the dev diaries and all that sort of stuff.
The question I'm asking myself is, do we not get beaters because they're so tight on schedule? We heard them say quite often on official live streams that they can't show off a new feature because it's not ready yet and it's like 3 days before release.
Yeah, that we've definitely heard that several times on the live streams. Like, it's not quite ready yet, so how much testing actually went into that? Well, I don't think that the scenario editor necessarily is not functional. I think it works exactly the way they want it to work. Our problem is it doesn't work the way we want it to work.
Yeah. Working as intended.
Speaking of that, what's good about the scenario editor?
I think it's pretty fully featured. Even if some of those features don't work like I'd like them to, you're actually able to do quite a bit, which I'm quite happy with. And it gives you quite a broad scale with a lot of the options you can do, even down to selecting which loans would be available, which offers of the marketing would be available. It's quite in depth what you can do. The ability to be able to lock off bits of scenery, you know, so that people in the scenario when they're playing it can't edit the scenery and stuff like that.
Well, they can open it in a scenario editor and completely change it, but yeah.
Well, you could always get a Game Genie and cheat on all your Nintendo games too. But
yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I'm in the camp where I'm just really disappointed by it, to where I'm like, you know, just take the parts that are widely used by the community and just have, you're better off adding that to Sandbox than kind of showing us, you know, inside the box and being like, oh, this is really all that's there. It's like, oh, that's not great. I have an idea, but I'll probably save that for a little bit later, of maybe how they could kind of improve a little bit of the experience, but it's a long shot.
The way I use the scenario editor is to, you know, make the map bigger, change the spawn points, stuff that should be part of the sandbox game because that's what a sandbox is, but we got later in the scenario editor, so that's simply the way I use the scenario editor.
The sandbox doesn't quite work as sandbox should, I don't think. All the sandboxes in Planet Coaster is you have unlimited money and you're able to turn off a few things. Personally, for me, a sandbox, the guests should have unlimited money as well.
Sure.
And they should ride stuff based on what looks good and what they think looks good, you know, and leave when they're tired. In Sandbox, if you hover over the money, it will tell you how much money you're losing, and I don't think it should do that. And money shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
Well, on one hand, I agree. On the other hand, I don't, because I like to see how much money I spend, which in this case, I only see the last 3 months, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like to see if the park would work out, if there was money.
They tell you your park value, which is the sum total of everything I think that you've built, plus something else. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I also don't know the difference between that and company value. I think company value is just park value plus profit, but I'm not sure.
There's also that vague like bonus rating too. Did anyone ever figure out what that number meant?
No.
There's a few bonuses, like scenery bonus, guest happiness bonus.
Yeah.
There's the money bonus where it's like, oh yeah, if you have money in the bank, you get a bonus for your rating. Like
Right.
there's a few of them, but I'm not sure if you're talking about like a bonus of just bonus.
I remember if you mouse over, I don't have the game open, so I can't, but mouse over the rating.
Park balance bonus is the one you're thinking of, I think.
Yeah.
Which I think is how close the ride number and the scenery number are.
Yeah, I thought park balance bonus was the amount of money you had, your actual like bank balance.
That's kind of what I thought too.
But it goes up and down even in Sandbox.
We're guessing that it's the balance between what the ratings of the rides you have installed and
The first number is ride rating, and then the second number is scenery rating. And I think the park balance bonus increases on how close those numbers are.
Interesting.
I'm going to do a really, really funky test here. Just give me like 30 seconds. I've opened a blank park and threw down a chair swing. At the moment, my ride number is 74 and my scenery is 2. So I'm going to just throw some scenery blueprints down and see if the bonus increases. Yeah.
And that makes sense if that's the case. And that would incentivize you to focus on both.
Okay, so now the ride rating is 72 and the scenery rating is 89, and the park balance bonus has gone up from 2 to 12.
Well, we've done it.
World first.
Thanks,
There you
Jonti.
go. They did the math.
So, with all that in mind, we've already touched on this a little bit, but how do we fix this?
I have two solutions. One's an easy fix, one's a much more difficult fix, but a more interesting one. The first one is let us modify the modifier in which ride prestige correlates to ticket price. Let us lower that or raise that as we wish, so that way we can make rides be less profitable. I think that would go a long way. The other one is an example from a community project within World of Warcraft called Simulation Craft. You basically are able to simulate a character's DPS output, which stands for damage per second, so that you can simulate like, oh, what's my best gear pieces, what's my best talents, you know, what's the numbers that I should be doing. And it kind of simulates an encounter non-visually. It's just through calculations. It just goes through a few spreadsheet calculations and you're done. If you could do that with a theme park in Planet Coaster, not only do you make playtesting easier, because you could be like, hey, is this even possible to do it with these conditions, with this research tree, just to kind of do a very rough outline of, yeah, it's possible, you know, waste 5 hours of your time trying to see if it is possible while playtesting it. But you could utilize that tool to maybe, you know, in another installment of Planet Coaster or another update, yeah, you can have a scenario where you're competing against another park and there's a background sim for that other park running somehow, kind of with the same tech. And, you know, it's a long shot. It takes a lot of time to implement it. But if a bunch of community members in World of Warcraft can do what they do, I think it's definitely possible for Frontier to do it if they found it worthwhile.
What I do really like from what you just said is the idea of having competition for your park. I think that definitely would throw another wrinkle into the potential for a scenario editor if you had to, say, not accomplish X by Y, but do better than the other park by Y. And then you could tune the strength of the other park. And then it's sort of kind of the same gameplay, but you feel more immersed in the world. You feel like you're on the planet that has more than one theme park in it, not just the planet of your theme
A
park.
planet of coasters, if you will.
Oh.
Potentially, yeah.
Roll credits.
We're done here.
Billy kind of sums up what I wanted to say, really. It all comes down to feedback. I just think we need more feedback in the game. If I change a number, what's it doing? When I first started Red Planet, and you can go back and see on episode 1, I'm like, this is the new series, guys. This is going to be our short form Planet Coaster content. We're going to do a couple of episodes a week. We're going to make loads of scenarios. Because at the time, I just started Pinewood Hills, which is a very sort of realistic, budget focused park.
Oh, how naive you were.
I was dead psyched for it, and I did one and stopped. And I think that probably tells you all you need to know about what I think about scenarios. And the reason I stopped is because every time I made a change, I had to go and play the scenario to see if that change was okay. It took up so much time because I just had to play my own scenario over and over again. And although I don't quite know what the solution is, there must be a better way to sort of, you know, problem solve than me having to physically go in and do the task over and over again.
Well, the solution is to make your scenario last for 6 months only. By the way, you should download Fairground Greed right now on the Steam Workshop and give it a go.
Wow.
Yeah, I think the main concern that you just brought up is something that we really hammered on last time we talked about this, which was just how long it takes to make a scenario, which isn't necessarily a detriment to the editor itself. You know, we all know that it takes a long time to do anything in Planet Coaster, but, you know, we are looking for solutions on how we can make this process easier. You know, the easier it is to make scenarios, the more scenarios we're going to see. And,
Potentially.
Excuse me. Dying.
Oh shit.
Sorry.
And another exclusive on schematics, Cleave dying live on
Hey,
air.
if you can just do that a little quieter and we'll carry on.
Can you die a little quieter, please?
Sorry. The more scenarios we get, the higher chance are that some of them are going to be good.
Yeah.
And if we get good scenarios, we're going to get those big YouTubers back in and interested in playing the game again, and that's going to drive popularity for the game, and it's going to drive more people back into the game. It's going to drive sales for the game, and that can only all be good for all of us. So,
Do we? I know it's way off topic, but is there any chance to get big Let's Play YouTubers get back to Planet Coaster? I don't see it, honestly.
I don't see it either.
I don't see it either.
If I talked to Dylan, Frontier Expo, a conflict nerd Dylan, what would make you play the game again on the channel? And he said more management stuff. He said, because I don't have the time. He said, I know you guys, I know you create really great looking stuff. As a daily producer of content, I don't have the time to do 3-4 hours of play and make a 10-minute video.
Which is fair.
Right.
Part of me thinks that the scenario editor was a bit of a push towards people like Flabberleaky, Nerdcubes, you know, all these guys that started off playing for a while and then fizzled off because it probably ended up to be too much work for the views they were getting. But it just wasn't as implemented as well as it could have been, maybe.
Yeah, I think those kind of content creators are looking for the type of game that they can play for 60 minutes and accomplish something, and also be challenged enough that the viewers are going to find interest in the content as well. Because if something is just super easy and there's no real challenge for the player, then it's not really going to be as fun for the viewer either, you know?
That plus, there's really nothing unexpected happening in the game.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too, is it's a very on the rails type of gameplay experience when you play Planet Coaster. You know exactly what's going to happen forever.
Which means you can clickbait the shit out of your videos.
Yes.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I think it was Conflict Nerd who did a challenge park originally, and I remember his first few episodes, he was advertising it as, you know, he was plugging it as, oh, we're doing this in challenge mode, so we've got to think about money, and we've got, you know, management as well as making it look good. And then by episode 4, it was just a sandbox park because he just got that much money sitting in the bank that it didn't matter anymore. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm the type of player that challenge mode is built for. That is exactly what I look for in games.
Yeah.
I was the same way. I made one park and I'm like, all I need to do is just build like 2 rides and let my game run overnight, and then I have all the money I would ever need.
Yeah.
So like, what's the point?
And that's if you build 2 bad rides. If you built like 2 high prestige rides, you'll just get that within an hour.
It all just comes down to balance again, doesn't it? I know we sound like broken records, but it's just balance. The game is just not balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there were just a lot of things that were put into the game and worked and were never thought about again because they worked within the construct of the gameplay. Like in terms of it wasn't buggy, not that it was good gameplay, and they were never looked at again.
I kind of wonder how many hours the devs actually played the scenarios they put in themselves.
Great question.
Another thing I wanted to touch on a little bit is that the community doesn't have good examples of scenarios from Frontier to make with the new editor. They don't know really what to do, and this is technically game design. You're designing a level.
Not only that, but when the scenario editor came out, they explicitly mentioned that they would no longer be making scenarios because they gave us the scenario editor.
Yeah.
And I hate to pull this term out because it's kind of crappy, but that was kind of a slap in the face to a lot of players. Like, what?
Yeah, that was a slap in the face of the casual player that they so desperately need to continue supporting the game.
Yeah.
How many of them were sitting there working through the career scenarios still at that point?
I mean, when it comes to newer players picking up the game for the first time, whether you're talking about like the more recent holiday sales and the humble sales continuing after that, I'm pretty sure a lot of people try to give it a shot.
Yeah.
A lot of people did, I know.
Yeah, that's true. I had quite a big boost during the Steam sales, and I had a lot of comments on year-old tutorial videos, you know, saying, oh, thanks very much for this. Yeah.
Same here.
Yeah, with the scenario editor, a reason why we're not seeing that many scenarios is that just not enough knowledge out there to cope with any of that, because you are playing game designer here. Just like in Planet Coaster, you're playing level designer. There are college courses based off of that. How do you kind of educate a casual player on like, yeah, this is how you would tune a scenario well, and you would, you know, the basis would be copy and paste from what you saw in the career, which is how a lot of people did it in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, and I think 2, I think that had scenarios as well. There's just nothing out there, and when the baseline isn't really that engaging, the imitations are going to be far worse. You know, I hate to say it.
You make perfect sense with that point. It's a tall ask for a casual player to be a professional game designer when you guys yourselves have not even necessarily done a great job with your own tools.
Yeah.
Was that too harsh?
No, I don't think so. I think a lot of their scenarios feel like placeholders and gap fillers, you know?
Yeah.
I always found the weird. Career mode, to me, should have been scenarios. So the first one is a little park where you build a carousel and a little Woody or something, you know, and then, because you've done such a good job, you've been invited to have a go at this park,
Right.
you know, like I felt like that should have been what we got a bit more. Whereas in fact, what we got was the first one's pirates, and then there's a monolith, and this one's got a big gorge in it, and this one, you know what I mean? They were just all a bit over the place.
You're looking for progressive gameplay where you are pushed through the game,
Yeah, a little.
and through a story.
Yes, I have a question for you guys. Do you think that the scenario maps were honestly just the maps they made for trailer footage and screenshots, and they're like, well, we'll put them in the game somehow. How do we do it? We'll just add some gameplay rules.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, definitely. And I think some were done from people as well. I think because what that King Coaster one at the end, that was a community guy made that.
I remember that from like Alpha 2 or something like that.
I think.
With the release of the scenario editor, Frontier stated that they won't do any new scenarios for the game. Do you think that they said it in the hope that the community will take over and provide enough scenarios for casual players to play? And do you think they are looking back and now are a little bit disappointed in the reception of the scenario editor? So basically, in short, will we see Frontier-made scenarios in the future again?
I don't think they wanted to make them in the first place, so I don't really think so.
No.
I think that they're disappointed, but I don't necessarily think that they care enough to get back into it.
Yeah, they can't not be disappointed. Like, again, I say it right at the beginning, I'll say it again now. I genuinely can think of maybe 5 decent scenarios that I've seen.
Yeah. And this was not an easy task to get the scenario editor working.
No.
They did put a lot of effort into getting this ready for us. So yeah, they have to be disappointed with the reception of it.
I'll be honest with you, I say it again, I know people think I'm really negative. I don't think we're going to see any much major free stuff now. I think we're going to see 1 or 2 more DLCs in the style of Spooky and Adventure, and I think that's kind of them going to be wrapping up Planko then.
I agree with that.
You think the dev cycle on Planko is going to be done by Q4 2018? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'd say so. I reckon they're going to try and smash out a couple more DLCs, and then I think all we'll get from them for a year is Jurassic World stuff, and then whatever comes next. But I think that until we get Planko 2, I think that's probably what we're going to see happen, yeah. But I'd love to be proved wrong.
I completely disagree with you.
Oh.
I want to disagree with him, but I'm not entirely sure. I just don't know. What you're saying is contrary to what they said to us during the development of the game, which was that they wanted to work on this game, for 5 years.
Yeah.
And I desperately want that to be true.
They also said it was going to be Simulation Evolved.
Told us a lot of things. They did.
Point taken. Still, I disagree because, first of all, they didn't talk about Simulation Evolved at Frontier Expo anymore, but they still talked about the 5-year plan, but that's just a side note.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what they said, and I can't prove it because we can't see the numbers on Steam Spy for separate DLCs, is that Spooky sold way more copies than they expected in the first place, and Adventure even outsold Spooky. So I don't see any financial reason to stop supporting the game because, well, milk the cow as long as it gives milk, right?
We'll get DLCs, paid ones, we'll get a few more.
Yeah.
For me, it's important to know that plans change based on new events, new information. And I think that while they have the intention of doing a 5-year plan, maybe they see some of the limitations that are really hard to overcome in development for Planet Coaster right now. And they're like, well, this isn't going as planned.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we're better off focusing on a different project or focusing on a sequel or something like that
Yeah.
for now. And maybe that 5-year plan turns into a 2-year or a 3-year plan. I wouldn't be upset about it at all, though. It's a single player game. It's been out for over a year now. It's still something I'm going to be playing for a very long time. I wouldn't blame them, and I wouldn't feel bad about it. I understand completely.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't feel shortchanged. You got to remember that when they mentioned a 5-year plan, I very much doubt they'll have had the Universal license for a Jurassic World game,
No, they did not.
So that's going to have been a big different change. But I completely agree. Listen, I know we always sound a little bit negative on these things. Well, I do anyway. But I'm not even a third done with the park I'm building. I thoroughly enjoy going in and playing every week.
Mm-hmm.
I have still a million ideas that I want to put in. I still haven't used half of the pieces probably in the game. There are still rides I haven't placed down. My park that I'm working on at the moment has 1 roller coaster in it. I've still got hours and hours left in this game. But I think from a point of view of DLC, 2, maybe 3 more paid DLCs. That's it. Fight me.
I disagree with that.
Oh, definitely, and I'm not disagreeing with you on the point that plans change, but I disagree on the point that I don't see any reason why they should change the plan, because the DLC are selling way better than they expected, so why stop here?
My question is, DLC support seems pretty, I don't want to say easy, but it seems like a good idea, but I'm wondering about bug fixes in the future, or if something breaks, are they going to prioritize fixing it in the future, you know, from another release?
Good question.
I know this episode's about scenarios, but I'd be completely happy from now on if they just went down the cosmetic route and did DLCs every quarter and just gave us a few new rides and like 100 new pieces. That's just how I play the game, you know. Like, as you know, the scenario editor could be perfect. I still don't think I'd be using it that much.
Same.
Yeah.
But we got way off topic here again, so let's get back to the scenario editor with a question especially for Billy and Jonti. When you were building your scenarios, were there things you were actually surprised of because you didn't realize or didn't matter in Sandbox so far?
Ride choice was actually something that was interesting, because like there's depth with that. There's a Wild Mouse coaster that's in the game, has a terrible rate for riders per hour, but it's in there as a bit of a, hey, you can do it if you want to. It's cheaper. There's a prefab blueprint that you can use too, but it's going to cost you in the long run when you might not have the ability to, you know, pay for those costs. But, you know, I kind of realized that when playing around with a limited ride pool, and it took a while to play with it, was that, yeah, each ride has their own quirks, has their own, you know, excitement, of course, but riders per hour is something you don't really think about until it's really down to the wire. That was interesting depth. I enjoyed testing it. I enjoyed playing it. Other people enjoyed playing it too, from what I was able to gather. And I would like to see, you know, going forward, that would be nice to enforce. But the scenario editor just doesn't do that for a longer term scenario. But if you're doing it for a year or 2 or 5 or 10, I mean, even the prestige system itself goes to 10 years when a ride becomes classic. Who is going to be playing a scenario for a 10-year in-game duration? Again, it goes back down to balance. It's a bit messy.
I found a similar thing really with the idea of ride selection, because it is quite good and it's relatively in depth. I might thought for the next scenario that didn't come after I realised how sort of ridiculous they were to make. I didn't really know how the scenario would play out, but the idea of having it set in the sort of 50s, so the only thing you could build was like carousel, leap the dips, you know, that kind of thing. Again, I really wanted the guests to work differently, because I would have had all the guests be wealthy, because, you know, back then the only people who could afford to go to these places would have been relatively wealthy or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I had loads of ideas for scenarios, and I was really, really hoping. I know Rudy as well, RudiRennkamel, had loads of ideas for scenarios. We chatted quite a bit about it. I don't think Rudy ever came out with one.
No.
You know, just because the tool was just so funky.
I wanted to make a scenario where you had a small plot of land, there was nothing on it, but all the theme park rides were buried underneath it, and your job was to try to earn enough money just to be able to afford the terrain digging so that you can dig up your theme park, and the goal would be get to the end, you know? But you can't modify the terrain cost to be substantial enough, and that just destroyed the entire idea.
That's kind of cool.
See, I remember seeing something on maybe Bro Nation about the park in a pit. Was that what that was going to be? Is it?
That was what that was going to be, and it just didn't work out.
That's a cool idea, yeah.
Now I'm sad because that sounds cool.
It just doesn't work because you could only make it to where terrain edits cost $20 per edit, and that's, again, an arbitrary number that doesn't mean anything to me, and it's just too cheap.
Yeah, what's an edit? What's one edit? You know, what's one click? Yeah.
So guys, let's wrap this up with another quick round. So what's our conclusion?
The conclusion is scenario editor needs a lot of work, but it probably isn't worth it.
Yeah.
Making a scenario is more effort than the result of the scenario that you make.
It was something that honestly would have been very important for the game to have and to have done right. It is a little too late, and it's too much of a disappointment to really dwell on it. Go with the sandbox stuff and just focus on that for now.
Great. I love to end on a positive note.
Stop. It's already dead.
Tune in next time when we talk about the end of days.
All right, and that's it for this episode of Journey to Perfection. Thanks again, Jonti and BillyMFMays, for joining us this time. And for our listeners and viewers, thanks again for listening and viewing. As usual, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, feel free to use our wonderful comment section under the video. See you next time. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.